Few companies have generated as much shareholder wealth as Eicher Motors. And joining me today is the man who triggered the turnaround in the company when he took over a decade back. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Siddharth.
And you, Ranjit?
It's one of your chic outlets. Why don't you show me around how it is?
Sure, let's go in.
Few companies have generated as much shareholder wealth as Eicher Motors. And joining me today is the man who triggered the turnaround in the company when he took over a decade back. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Siddharth.
And you, Ranjit?
It's one of your chic outlets. Why don't you show me around how it is?
Sure, let's go in.
Okay. So Siddharth, you have sort of explained this new phase in your company as phase 2, which is where you've sort of set yourself like high global ambition. You've said that you want to sort of target the medium duty segment, and by 2030, 50% of the market you would want. So just talk a little more about your global strategy. How different will it be from whatever you've done in India so far?
Well, in the larger scheme of things, it's going to have to be very different, and that's why we're sort of internally in our organization preparing ourselves for a new phase. It doesn't mean that we ignore India. That's our starting point. That's where most of our sales, most of our profits, most of our scale, our business model, our team, manufacturing, engineering, everything comes from here.
Right.
So
yeah.
This is our bastion. This is what we work with, and this is extremely important. So strengthening India is extremely important for a future play. So without a strong India, nothing happens. Right? So that's the starting point. And so we're doing a lot of work in India. But then what we figure in the larger scheme of things is that, and me and the team, and we've traveled a lot, and in the last 20 years, we've spent a lot of time just going to other markets. We're not selling too many motorcycles there, but we are understanding, absorbing for many, many years. And what we've understood is that there's a gap.
Right.
And we see that gap, sometimes you see the gap like really plain and wide, and it's there. It's there for the taking. No one is really going for it in the manner that we would like to. So maybe I shouldn't talk that much about it. But it's the gap is that there are not many, let's say, fun, evocative, simple,
In that
middleweight motorcycles in the world which are accessible. And there are motorcycles. So it's not that they're absent. It's just that they're not as super exciting, or let's say, or they're not brands which evoke interest and love.
Right.
And
that's what you're going to.
That's where we want to be, and we see that. And we see in developing markets, for example, we see that what's the trend that's happened in India, which is basically commuters.
Premiumization.
Yeah, premiumization, and something like that. But what they're saying is that we want something more. We want something that reflects our personality. We want something that we can go long distance. We don't want just a simple A to B commuter. And that has taken off in India, and we've, I believe, been at least on our side,
surely
pulled a lot of that market up. We can see that in Latin America and Southeast Asia clearly right now. It should happen, and we want to drive that.
Right. In fact, we will quickly talk about your difference in strategy in the developed markets and the developing markets in just a bit. But tell us a little more about the fact that you recently announced your own subsidiary distribution company in the US. You made some high-profile hirings, from different sort of premium and sports motorcycle manufacturers. When do we see your sales begin in the US, and typically, like, what are the kind of products that you would be that you'd be targeting for a very developed market like America?
Yeah, similarly to where we started off in India, to that extent, I think there's some similarities. That my view is that while we're talking about this and we're spending a lot of time, energy in a new geography, which means relatively new customers. It's a known brand, but it's still new. People haven't purchased it as much. New distribution in a lot of cases, not in all cases. All of these things, if you put all these things together, it takes a hell of a time. It's not going to happen overnight. So what we're doing is we're building up a team, we're building up capability, we're building up knowledge and presence. And honestly, we're going to make a ton of mistakes while we go forward. We already have. So what's going to happen is that I think the phase over the next 5 years is to just establish foundation of the brand, of distribution, of understanding. We'll get some new products in. Hopefully some will do well. Probably some won't. We'll get to learn from that. And I think the next 5 years, in my opinion, is more foundation building. Right. And with the right team. So as you said rightly, what we focused on is we know we have a great brand. People are very receptive to it in international markets. They hear Royal Enfield, they hear the history, and they're like, they're already forward. So that's already good for us. So now we're building a very strong team around that, and that's what's going to help us learn and navigate our way to creating a global brand, because it's not going to be easy, but we know where we want to go.
Right. So, but when, just give us an idea, when do we see you entering then the US market, since you've already set up a company by...
It's not entering US market. We've actually been present in US for 15 years through a distributor.
Right.
It was a half-hearted play. Exactly. So now we've got a nearly 15-member team, and like you said, some really, really good people from the top of the industry in the US. So we've been able to attract them, which is also really exciting for me. Actually, that's probably the most exciting part, that we talk to these people and they're actually willing to join us. I'm like, okay, thanks, that's great. So, but for a reason, I hope. And yeah, so we are starting 1st of January. We start our own market company sales. So we are appointing our own dealers.
Right.
We're probably opening up a store or two on our own, and that's how we're going forward in the US. It's going to take time. I mean, hopefully we'll have sales growth. We will have sales growth, but on a small base right now.
Right.
So our objective of reaching, let's say, I mean, it's a very loose objective because every market is different in size, but basically from hundreds, which we were doing in markets, we want to reach in the 10,000 plus range. That's a very round number, but in any international market of size, because that's then a sizable player in that market. So it's not about our percentage of export from India. We don't care about that. What we care about is being relevant in that market. So firstly, we want to have enough so that there's enough distribution, there's enough presence on the roads, all of that. So that's another 3-4 years down, I think, for all.
So like from hundreds to 10,000, talking about the developed world per se, or just the US or North America?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the US, the idea is that, in order to sustain the number of stores that we require, and in order to get, some traction in the middleweight market, that's a kind, I'm just giving order of magnitude in the next 3-5 years. If we can start selling 1,000 a month, that's an interesting start. Then we're making a dent in the market. We're not just making a dent on, I don't care about making a dent in our P&L here in India, that's not important, but dent in that market, that's important. And people see us as relevant, as somebody who makes quality motorcycles, which are evocative and beautiful. That's important for us.
Right. And you've and will this also be a gateway to other North American markets like Canada and places like that, Mexico? Do we see that?
Sure. I mean, USA is the
is the mother
there.
And
in fact, the Royal Enfield North America team is going to run Canada as well. But other than that, we've not yet decided. I mean, it could happen for sure, but that's not in our current vicinity. There's enough on the plate for between USA and Canada.
Right. You've said that, however, that the fulcrum of growth, the main sort of boost is going to come from the developing markets, and hence, with that idea, you've entered the Indonesian market. You announced that in August. So, so tell me a little bit more about it in terms of, the developing market. Are you seeing similarities between India and Indonesia, since it's the world's 3rd largest motorcycle market?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the longer term, if you're going to develop markets in the order of magnitude of India, or that's going to be developing markets. We're not going to sell, I mean, I can't even think of the time frame, but we're not going to sell many tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands in a developed market. That's, I'd love to, but I don't think that's going to happen, at least because the size of the market is not, unless we grow the size of the market. But anyway, the focus is that in developing markets, where you have an India-like environment, where there's millions of population of commuters. That's the important part. So there's already, in Indonesia, probably 20, 30 million people on commuting motorcycles, right? So that is our audience. And when they are looking for an upgrade, we want to be right there in their upgrade path. So while the brand is quite different, so when you see a Royal Enfield brand in a showroom, or it's extremely different from seeing a Indo-Japanese, Chinese type sort of brand, right? But from a accessibility point of view, it's in their direct path. Because we want to be a brand which is an upgrade brand, not a super high brand. Right? So there, Indonesia and all fit in extremely well.
No, the fact that you've now sort of set up your own sort of, distribution company in the US, will a similar sort of strategy also pan out in the developing markets? But that's where you're looking at the volumes, and logic would suggest that, intuitively that you would have to follow a similar sort of an approach in the developing markets.
We're taking each market individually, and we don't want to be there in too many markets. In fact, if you see on paper, we've actually reduced the number of markets we are in the last few years, because if you're selling a container here and 150 bikes there, and it's not strategic, we're in fact pulling out. So, but every single market that we want to enter into, it is a market that we will take individually. So just to give you an example, in Colombia, we found an amazing partner. They're really, really good. They understand Royal Enfield brand. They have existing distribution. They're willing to invest in new distribution for us. And so we went with them. And in Colombia, we understand the cultural nuances. People want to buy from a Colombian firm. That's what we believe now. Maybe wrong, but that's what we've understood after spending a couple of years there and understanding the market. So there we've gone with the partner. In Indonesia, which you asked about, for example, we've said right now the duties are extremely high and we don't have any plans immediately to start manufacturing there, for example. So instead of going for a wide approach, like we're going in Colombia, a wider approach in Colombia, let's put it, we're in 5-6 cities, etc. In Indonesia, we've said Jakarta is the it's the big guy there, right? So if you can crack Jakarta, then we're sorted, I think. So anyway, these are all assumptions, right? So what we're saying in Jakarta is that let's put up a beautiful single store. Right now we're after a single store, which has all of Royal Enfield. So it looks like this, and maybe a few more motorcycles, there's some more gear, but so and then to really get under the skin, to get with the people, to get with the riders, to create a demand pull for Royal Enfield, so that people in Jakarta are saying, look, this is interesting, I like this motorcycle.
In that region, do we also see you looking at, at a later stage, local assembly there, considering, again, as I keep coming back to the point of, you're saying that will be the growth sort of driver. So how will you do it? Because there people will say you will lose your competitiveness if you're sort of
So in the long term, once we see that success, we're in Jakarta, we're also in Bangkok now, we're getting into Bangkok, so similarly. And once we see success in these markets, and a few of these markets, we will certainly like to do local manufacturing, we will have to do local manufacturing to be a relevant player there. But that's step 2 for us, that's not step 1. So we first go in, create demand, and then we'll do local.
So apart from the developed markets, you've talked about Colombia, you've talked about Indonesia, you've talked about Thailand. More in the pipeline, Siddharth? Are you studying more markets in this region?
Yeah.
And what? What sort of?
Like if the big guy in Southeast Asia is Indonesia, and Thailand's pretty large as well, on the other hand. In Latin America, it's Brazil, right? So that's the big daddy out there. That's where... So have you started internally studying? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been there. Our team has studied that market a lot. We've been spending a lot of time there. We have Royal Enfield employees, let's say local Brazilian chap sitting there who works for us, and we've been working a lot. So there's a lot of stuff going on, let's say behind the scenes right now, to understand the market, to see what play we can make. It's a very tricky market, Brazil.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was chatting with the KTM CEO. He was also talking about how tricky Brazil is. Let's quickly slip into a break. On the other side, we'll focus specifically on the India market. Stay tuned.